Elias Vance moved like a force of nature, his plasma blade, a brilliant arc of white-hot energy slicing through the reinforced armor of Overlord Malakor's elite guard. The air crackled with displaced ozone and the deafening roar of weapons fire, vibrating the metal deck plating beneath his heavy boots. Behind him, Lyra pressed against the trembling bulkhead of Outpost Zenith, her empathic senses flooded by the sheer velocity of his intent. Elias did not look back, but the magnetic pull between their bodies anchored his every strike. A glancing blast from a Scourge-heavy rifle scorched his shoulder plate. He gritted his teeth, the heat searing his nerve endings, but he pushed forward, shielding the Lumini diplomat with his own frame. He was a man who had traded his rifle for a garden, but war came knocking anyway. The hegemony had made the fatal mistake of threatening the one soul who had finally breached his defenses. It had not started in the blinding flash of a vanguard assault. The galaxy's most terrifying predator was simply a broken man trying to protect his fragile peace, hidden away on a world of blinding ice. Elias had felt the rhythmic vibration of the approaching transport long before it crested the frozen ridges of his sanctuary. He was kneeling in the snow, tending to resilient frost blooms, his massive hands calloused from agricultural labor rather than the recoil of a weapon. The burden of survivor's guilt had driven him into an extreme isolation, a self-sacrificing penance for the squad he could not save. When the Lumini ship landed, the ramp lowered to reveal Lyra. Even wrapped in heavy thermal gear, her presence radiated an unmistakable warmth against the freezing wind. She had come as a pacifist alien forced to awaken humanity's deadliest ghost. Her empathic resonance washed over him a gentle, probing tide that recognized his hidden grief instead of judging his lethal past. True diplomacy required understanding the emotional drivers of another, and Lyra saw right through the hardened exterior to a grieving father pushed too far. She closed the distance between them when her hands lightly brushed his forearm to steady herself. An electric shock of accidental touch flared between them, a jolt of pure energy thawing a decade of ice in his veins. She spoke frantically of Outpost Zenith. The ruthless Scourge hegemony had captured the vital station, holding innocent hostages, including dozens of children, in a brazen play for sector dominance. Elias looked at the endless white horizon, then back to Lyra's luminous eyes. The heat of her lingering gaze held a beautiful plea. She was not just asking for a soldier. She was asking for him. The thought of those children, combined with Lyra's quiet courage, ignited a dormant reactor in his chest. He knew the principles of asymmetric warfare better than anyone. A smaller force could defeat massive armies by utilizing psychological tactics, stealth, and decapitation strikes against central leadership. He knew exactly how to break the Scourge. Within hours they were airborne. The blur of motion outside the viewport mirrored the adrenaline surging through his system. Elias checked his restored armor seals, his shoulder deliberately brushing Lyra's in the tight confines of the dropship. The terrifying relief of having a purpose again, and having her beside him, solidified his resolve. An empire would burn for the innocents it tried to extinguish. The dropship breached Outpost Zenith's perimeter with a concussive impact, throwing them straight into the fire. Elias moved as a blur of motion, his plasma blade igniting with a hum that sent a thrilling vibration up his arm. He carved through the outer defenses, a vanguard of light and power, breaking the Scourge lines before they could even register the assault. Lyra moved right behind him, her empathic senses predicting enemy fire and guiding his strikes with an unspoken synergy. Even amidst the blinding flashes of laser fire, he checked her position constantly, the terrifying relief of seeing her unharmed fueling his momentum. They burst into the central command deck. Overlord Malakor stood flanked by his heavy guard, a towering brute encased in reinforced armor. Elias did not hesitate. He lunged. The air superheated as his plasma blade clashed against the Overlord's energy halberd. Sparks rained down like miniature supernovas. Elias gritted his teeth against the immense physical pressure, the sheer heat of the clashing weapons blistering the air around them. He felt a sudden, sharp spike of panic, not his own, but Lyra's, projecting a warning to his mind. He dropped to one knee, narrowly dodging a lethal swing, and drove his blade upward. The strike severed the Overlord's defenses, ending his tyrannical reign in a single, devastating arc of white light. Malachor crashed to the deck. The decapitation strike worked perfectly. Without their central command, the remaining Scourge forces fractured, their coordination shattering instantly. They dropped their weapons and fled to the escape pods. The roar of battle was quickly replaced by the tearful, joyous cries of rescued children flooding from the holding cells. Elias deactivated his weapon, his chest heaving. He turned and found Lyra. She closed the distance immediately, wrapping her arms around his armored waist. The magnetic pull between them was absolute, the electric shock of her touch instantly grounding his combat-addled senses. They had won. Among the rescued hostages was a small, wide-eyed alien orphan who clung tightly to Lyra's robes, safe from the conflict. Elias knelt, his massive, scarred hand resting gently on the child's shoulder, an unspoken promise taking root in his heart. Months later, the Galactic Tribunals offered Elias a chest full of grand honors and the command of entire fleets. He rejected every single one. Instead, the bright sun of Verdant Haven beat down on his shoulders, warming the fertile soil beneath his boots. The colony was a beacon of growth and vibrant energy. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, looking toward the wooden porch of their homestead. The rescued orphan was laughing, running through the blooming garden. Lyra leaned against the railing, her eyes catching his. The heat of her lingering gaze held all the answers he would ever need. He had traded war for this life, and as she walked down the steps to press a soft kiss against his cheek, the electricity of her proximity told him he was exactly where he belonged. Would you like me to draft a character dossier for Elias and Lyra to expand on their backstory? Or perhaps sketch an outline for a new mission that threatens Verdant Haven?